Lesson 5, managing Windows networking. So we're going to be talking about how do we take our desktop, our laptop, and plug it back up into the network. Now, we already went over a couple of things in Core 1 when it comes to IP addresses, DNS, ports, things of that nature. So I'm assuming everybody feels at least comfortable with how we actually hook up to the network. And then what do we, an IP address shouldn't seem foreign to you as much, right? You kind of know that that's a an identifier of your computer when it comes to the network. And so we'll go a little bit deeper, but we won't really we won't go terribly deep in this lesson. So let's go ahead and get into it. Um, Configuring Windows networking. You can either be connected via a wire connection or a Wi-Fi connection. So I got here the Ethernet connection. We all know how we talked about that in Core 1, how we actually make an Ethernet cord. We put those wires in certain orders in order for that RJ45 to plug into our back of our desktop or laptop. And we can have a direct connection that way. Now, having an Ethernet connection is a better connection, a solid connection versus a Wi-Fi connection. A Wi-Fi connection, remember, it's a radio wave, so it's always being interfered by things that's physical or electronic, as far as coffee makers or blenders or microwaves, even lightning outside that can interfere with the radio waves that are going back and forth from your router to your device that you're trying to connect to. Now, I got here highlighted network name service set ID, the SSID. And I don't know if we talked about it, but I think we did, where I talked about how you can set those things up to show different Wi-Fi names at any given time, and you would have to go into your router to actually set this up. But the SSID, whenever they're talking about that, they're pretty much saying that this is what they're referring to, those names that you needed to connect to, and then have the actual password to get onto the network. Now, real quick, does everybody remember what a DNS is, or why do we use DNS? Thumbs up if we do. Thumbs down if you want me to go back over it. All right, thumbs down. So DNS, the DNS is going to be a way that we can identify different web addresses instead of them being just IP addresses. So here on the slide, we got IPv4, IP version 4, and then version 6, right? Each web address that we go to, such as google.com, espn.com, cnn.com, all of these things are things that we can speak and understand clearly just by saying the name, but their let's say their true identity is the IP addresses behind them. And so that's how the computers uh, conversate with each other on when to, hey, I want to go to CNN.com. Well, they don't really understand that. They understand the address that CNN is at. And so they use a setting called domain name system in order to set almost like a list. They keep a list of all of your domain names and the IP addresses that are associated with them. So whenever you go to a new website for the first time, it will kind of take maybe more than a second to actually figure it out, maybe 2 seconds, right? But it'll figure it out really quick, right? But what it's doing is it's checking with DNS servers that's out there online in the cloud or wherever they may be, and getting the IP address for the name that you typed in. So if, like we were talking about the restaurants, if we wanted to go and see how those chicken wings looked at the new restaurant that we're going to try out, we type in that restaurant's name. It takes a while just to figure it out. Okay, this restaurant name, um, domain name, is linked to this IP address, and then what it does is it puts it in a file for later. So just in case 2 weeks from now you want to look at more things on that menu on that web page, it doesn't have to go through that whole search again. It can refer back to its list and say, oh yeah, that's right here at this particular address. So that's DNS. DNS is going to do that for every um, domain website that we go to. We hinted at IP addresses. IPv4 is typically what we're going to always see when it comes to um, looking up our IP addresses. You remember, I love to pull up my CMD and I always put in my favorite command, which is IP config / all. And I'm able to see my IP address um, for my desktop here. Did that just plug in? Anyway, um, and you'll see, I'm sorry, you'll see that it actually shows up in version 4. Now we have for certain MAC addresses, we have IPVs, well, a version 6 version, but for most of the networks that you're working in, we're probably going to be using a version 4, where those are 4 numbers separated by 3 octets decimals, separating those. Now, remember, um, each one of those each one of those octets, so that 192, that 168 is going to be 8 bits within, right? So we had that in Core 1. If we need to go back over that, we'll probably go back over that within a week or two when we start to really kind of get back and start to get in our study mode. But anyway, version 4 uh, is typically what we're going to be working with. And when it comes to your network that you're getting on, you're probably going to get some type of DHCP action. And this is where we automatically obtain our IP address. DHCP is always looking for that new MAC address to come onto the network. And then once it sees it, that router is going to assign that new device its particular IP address. So how that process works is that I come to your, home or Starbucks or what have you. I go to my settings here. I click on my Wi-Fi to see what networks I can connect to. Once I connect to the Mitchell router here, I need to put in my password. That password is going to authenticate me to the network. And once I authenticate myself and say, hey, I have the right to be here, you can please give me an IP address. That router is going to automatically assign what they have free to my device. And now I'm able to talk on the internet or to other devices on that network. Now, you may have static configurations. So this means that every time you connect to the network, you get the same IP address each and every time. We typically use this for devices that don't really leave the network. So I typically use it on my TVs and my printers. So, well, printer, and they're not leaving the house, so they don't need to really change their IP address. It could be a security issue in reconnaissance, but that's out of the scope of this lesson. So public versus private. Now, when it comes to your networks, you can have a public IP address. Well, let me start off with saying what's a public don't public IP address. Let's just go with that. I don't want to go with the private domain. Public IP address means that the way the world sees your IP address is going to be set in a particular IP setting. And I had that pulled up here. So let's pull that back up and take a look at it. When you are using a public IP address, your IP address will typically be in these ranges here. Okay. Mine typically shows up in the 200 range, starting with that IP. That I octet. Your private, on the other hand, has more of a 192, 168. That's what we constantly see in our own home or whatever uh, small private network that you're connected to. So I want you to think of a private network as being somewhere we connect within our house or in the office. We connect to that whatever Wi-Fi that we're on. That's private to just us or whoever's on that network. Anyone from outside of that network, outside of that router, cannot come into our network unless authenticated. And if so, they will have a IP address that typically looks like this. That's out of our range. Okay. Now, if you ever want to see your public IP address, and this is something that happens at your router, whenever you go to your favorite website doesn't see your internal or your private IP address. It sees your public IP address. And so it knows to send back the information that you're wanting to that particular public IP address. If you ever wanted to see your public IP address, you can always go to your browser and type in what is my IP. And this website right here, with what is my IP address.com, will do a search real quick. You can see that it doesn't detect my version 6 IP address, but it does take the version 4, which is a 208.104.49.20. Now we go back over here, we could see that I fall down into that 208. I'm right here in this last group of IPs. That's how that website sees it. Um, Frankly speaking, that's how your computer right now on Zoom sees my computer, right? It sees that 108.104. It doesn't, but you've seen me pull up my give me one second. Where's anyway? You see me pull up my IP config and see that I have a private IP address here. You won't be able to see that from the public standpoint. Okay. So inside the network, we're gonna have a private IP address. This is going to be only accessible by us, where everything outside of the network, outside of your router, is going to have a public IP address. Now let's talk about the Windows Defender firewall configuration. So we remember what a firewall does, right? So the the firewall sits at the edge of our network, right? And it looks at a list, and what it does is, oh, I'm sorry, Caleb.
Um, I looked at I looked at the website and it showed that my stuff is showing in New York. My IP address is in New York.
Now you may be, and we will get to that once we get to like Tracert. So right up in here, you may get to that um because of where your provider is shooting your information to or from. Um, so when you just don't go directly to a web server. You bounce all over. Your network packet bounces all over. And this is what a trace route does. So I did a trace route and trace cert,
Oh,
and these hops go all over um, different spots in the US before they actually get to google.com, one of their many google.com servers. So
okay.
I say that to say this is that when it leaves your computer, there's no telling where it may go. It may jump all the way to New York, DC, to California. Now, it typically wants to stay within, I want to say logically, 1 or 2 states over, but don't be surprised if it bounces all over like that, um, in order to find a least resistant path to the destination you want to get to. Okay.
Okay.
Because it could be um it could be servers are hanging up traffic over here, and so it's rerouting your traffic in order for it to give you a good response time to the website that you put in.
Okay, yeah. I refreshed it and it showed Montgomery.
Okay. All right. Going back to, and we'll get back to the trace cert. Going back to the firewall configuration, you can Microsoft comes with a Defender Security Center on all of its OSs, and so we can always go in to actually um, manipulate the firewall and put more things in there that we want to block, or to actually free up some things that we want to have talk. Now, given what environment you're working in, you may have access to this or not. In your school setting, you may not be able to change these configurations. A good IT admin will make sure that you couldn't get in there and change these configurations, but you may have those permissions. I would definitely check and see if you can, but I would also warn you that if you go into these settings and you start to, you don't understand what you're changing, you could open it up to vulnerabilities, or you could shut the computer down to as far as working is actually working and communicating. So be careful. VPNs. We remember what a VPN is? Thumbs up, thumbs down if I need to go over a VPN. We feel good about the VPNs. All right. So VPNs, again, connecting, having a secure connection back to the network. Now, the wireless wide area network, this is going to really kind of, I want you to think about it being a mobile device, your laptop being a mobile device, and it having the capabilities to talk to the phone towers in order to receive signal, in order to have a Wi-Fi connection. But this also can come off a hotspot that you get, and this also could uh you can have a hotspot that's a standalone hotspot, or have it come off the phone, really. But you can also have a SIM card. Like in some tablets, you have SIM cards automatically into those, let's say your iPads, and they automatically receive a phone bill because it's going to communicate, regardless if you have your phone with you or if it's connected to the internet. I mean, the Wi-Fi or not. Caleb.
I raised my hand by accident.
Oh, gotcha. All right, proxy settings. So remember, a proxy means to pivot. When we set a proxy server up on a private network, we are looking for the traffic to come to that proxy server, and then we will decide on what we're going to do with that information. It's similar to a firewall, right? That firewall decides what it's going to do with the packets when it comes in. The proxy is going to do the same thing, but it's not as intrusive as the firewall. The proxy could see that you want to go to a gambling site, DraftKings.com, and they may say, "Hey, no, you know what? We have a content filter up. No gambling sites on campus." So that took your information. You typed in DraftKings.com. It took your information and says, "Oh, you want to go to DraftKings? I'm gonna pivot you back to the school website because we don't allow that. We proxied, or we pivot your traffic back to a known or safe spot to what we deem to be safe." Caleb, you raise your hand or no?
Yes, I raised my hand. I had
Gotcha.
a question. So a proxy server or yeah, proxy server address. So how does that affect if you put a proxy server address onto like per se, like can you put it onto the computer like the Wi-Fi I mean? Whereas when you automatically connect, it will block certain sites.
Can we put it where? I'm sorry, say that one more time.
Can we put it like per se through the internet server?
I always seen it as a separate appliance.
So that'd
We
be something that you had to
we
apply
can
to the
put the
devices.
configurations in. So if certain applications have the capabilities to, let's say, not be at a particular IP address and be at a different IP address, it can proxy to that different IP address and use that. Um, but when I'm thinking about a proxy server, it's more in this aspect of being a content filter and having it in a security standpoint where
Uh,
I'm looking at the information, and then if I deem the information to be harmful, I'm going to make a change to it. Um, but you can have it to have different IP addresses. But when I think of that now in today's world, I'm thinking more on a VPN doing that, where um, I'm coming from a private internal network out to the outside world, and I want to have a different IP address from people from seeing me from, let's say, if I'm in a Starbucks, so everybody's on the Wi-Fi, everybody can use Wireshark to see exactly what people are sending. I can use my VPN to come from, and set my VPN to come from Africa, and have my traffic go to Africa and then come back to the States. That makes sense.
yes, that makes sense.
Okay. So I'm not saying that you can't do it on a web server. You can, but I typically I typically would say use another appliance instead of using your web server to do proxying.
So what would you recommend? Like for say, I know I asked this question before when we was doing the security plus part. What would you
Mm.
recommend as in like to control like multiple devices, like connecting the devices to your Wi-Fi? How can you like control what they go on to? You know how like,
So,
and
yeah,
I know in
that
my
was
school, if you connect to the Wi-Fi on campus, it blocks TikTok.
so hold on. Are you trying to get past that?
No, I'm trying to add it to I'm trying to figure out something to add to my work study job because I work with kids and we want to control what they can get on and can't get on
Um, so when I went
with the
to
Chromebooks.
with the Chromebooks, so because Chromebooks are so light as far as applications is concerned, I'm trying to think about in the settings, is there something that can control the apps or the settings in there? So, like what I'm going to show you on this Windows machine is that we have a app and a browser control. This is the
Mhm.
same thing as a proxy, right? Um, it looks at the different websites and says, you know what, no, go this way, go that way. Um, but your Chromebooks might not. They probably don't have something like this in the settings. I would have to look it up. If you give me a chance, I can look that up and send you something tomorrow.
Okay, that'll work out.
Let me write that down real quick.
Yeah, because my the director, she been trying to have me in charge of the tech part, like aspect of the center. One of the projects I'm working on is applying passwords so that nobody can just automatically download stuff off of like download well prints. I want to have like a manager over the printing system or printer, and then also she wants me to try to figure out something as far as like the Wi-Fi, controlling people from getting on certain, well, controlling the students from getting on certain websites and stuff like that, like YouTube, or stuff like nothing educational, but something use
Yeah.
like Instagram and stuff.
Do you have access to your router?
Yes, I have access to it.
In your router, is it like a Cisco router or is it kind of like a home
It's
base?
it's Spectrum.
Say it again.
It's Spectrum for business. Spectrum business.
If you go into that web browser for that router, you should have a proxy there to where you could block certain websites, certain categories of websites. So if you didn't want gambling or adult sites, you can put it in there. And now you don't have to worry about going to each and every Chromebook to change settings. Whenever they connect to your Wi-Fi, if they go through your router, it's going to look to see if it's going to go to those different categories and redirect them. So
Okay.
it'll probably be in your router, but I'm still gonna look up to see if I can find something in the Chromebook.
Okay. Thank you. Because that's been the main thing I'm trying to see. I've been trying to look at.
Okay. All right. Troubleshooting the Windows networking. So you see me pull this up all the time, right? Favorite command. I call it the favorite command because I want you guys to remember this command. They're gonna ask. Some people are gonna ask you to do this in interviews, just because they want to see you do it and see you be able to look at this type of stuff and not get confused and know that this is the information that they want. So no, please keep in mind that IP config is one of the base commands when it comes to your CMD, and IF config is one of the basic commands when it comes to the Mac OS. So IF config does the same thing that the IP config does in the Windows setting. Ping test. Real quick, do y'all remember ping? What ping is? What do we use a ping? And
To receive a signal from a computer.
awesome, that is correct. The ping is always going to let us know if that server, that desktop, that whatever, if it has an IP address, especially if it's in a private network and we're all being able to connect or talk to each other, I should be able to go to my CMD and type in ping and the computer name. Typically, now let me throw this out there. Check this out. If I was to say ping ESPN.com, what is it going to use in order to turn ESPN.com into an IP address? What system? The computer is going to use a system to say, okay, it wants a ping, and I don't know what ESPN.com is. Let me change that to something that I can recognize, and then I can see if that server is up. What is it going to use?
Are you talking about the DNS? Is that what you're asking? Or yes?
That is correct. Yeah, it's going to use the DNS system to change ESPN.com into 18.165.83.20 to get me my ping and let me know that server is up and running. I just want the double dip in that because I seen that it was an opportunity. I appreciate that. All right, trace cert. So going back earlier, we seen that the trace cert, and we covered everything a little. I think where it starts off, a trace cert is going to be almost like bread crumbs from your computer out to the destination's computer. So not only are you getting a ping to know that a particular server is up and running, but you're seeing where you're going at when it comes to a check-in, almost like checkpoints. And sometimes it times out. as far as it's not coming back with enough information to give you a readout here. And if that's the case, you kind of get these timeouts here, but then it'll finish up with its destination being fulfilled. But these are what we call hops. These are, check-in points with other routers sending your packet from one spot to the next. And this happens in milliseconds. We don't even, for it actually takes longer to run a trace route than actually get to our destination. So I'm going to run another trace route. Trace cert. I'm sorry. Trace cert. These take a while. Not a terribly long time, but you see it starting off with my IP address. It goes to my router next. This is my gateway. My router is my gateway. Now it's going out to the internet, the actual outside of my private network. And it should come back with the private IP address that it checks in with. Timed out, didn't get that IP address, kept it going. Now I have a private IP address going out there for the next destination. Checks in with Caporium. Caporium is my internet provider. Gets that 204, that 208, 104. So it went from one IP public IP address, switched over to another IP address, public IP address from my provider, and now it goes out to. I have no idea where these things are at, but I want to say. No, I'm not going to say that. I really don't know. But they're checking in. I'm wondering if I can check in on Google. VirusTotal. So VirusTotal is a search engine that I use sometimes for work. And whenever I need to look up different websites or IP addresses, I come to VirusTotal and I just throw it in there real quick just to see what's the information that I can get onto it. So you can see here that simple trace route from my computer all the way to still going. But by the time we got over here, which I was kind of itching to say, it went across the sea. So this went all the way to the EU, Europe. And so now my packets are running all the way over there as well. Trying to get to the destination of going all the way to a place in South Carolina. This is, well, the school is in South Carolina. I'm not too sure if the website for the for that school is actually in South Carolina. It could be hosted somewhere else. But that just lets you know the different hops and the different geographical land that your packets can actually cover before they actually reach their destination. And to us, it just kind of seems like we're just, reaching out to our favorite website, not really going through that much trouble. But it's going all over the place, man. Good stuff. Close that out and let's get back to DNS. So one more thing that we use in the DNS era is the NS lookup. I always use the NS lookup if I need a particular IP address and I don't feel like going to VirusTotal to look it up. So I can do NS lookup and I can hit enter and then put in my web address, which would be, I'm gonna do Morris again. and I should be able to get a public IP address for their web server. I can also have it, it doesn't go back to my original command here to do like an IP config. It's still wanting to do some more NS lookups, so I can put in my website and see the IP address of my website, and vice versa. I could put in 8.8.8.8 and hit enter, and I should get the DNS name for this particular site. So that's using DNS. That's taking one thing and switching it to the other, and then reverse. It has the capability to do to do that same command in reverse. You give the IP address, it gives the actual domain name back. All right, Windows security settings. So let's talk about ACLs. ACLs is something that we touched on in Security Plus, but we really didn't. We can touch on it again. When it comes to users and users being on your network, you want to make sure that you give them least privilege when it comes to doing that work. You constantly hear me say, "Hey, give them enough information or enough permission just for them to do their work, and then everything else, let them request it later on." This is creating those access control. And those lists need to be monitored and then pruned every year, in my opinion. If not every quarter of the year, you need to go ahead and take people out, put people in, and just keep a good maintenance of it. But if you have a small team, this can get out of hand very quick. So the one thing that you do want to make sure that you do, even if you have a small team or not, make sure you have least privilege involved with your users. We also talked about user groups. We talked about user groups on our local machines, but we also talked about it in a AD setting, Active Directory setting. Those are where we can create those user accounts, and we can have different administrator accounts, guest accounts, and these type of groups can have different permissions assigned to them based off of the roles that we want to have them for. So if we have any vendors that's coming in, maybe we can have those vendors get a particular account that only has a certain amount of settings and permissions to where they can't really make any changes, but they need to see the stuff that they need to see in order to get their work done. We already talked about least least privileges. So let's talk about USCs. This window here is a USC. So typically, when you see this window pop up, it'll have a chime, and then it kind of blacks out the whole screen, and it will give you a yes or no. More likely, if you want to change the configurations or the settings or whatever you're trying to change. The reason why this happens is that UAC comes into play, and then they're saying Windows is saying to you, hey, in order for you to make this change, this change can be it can either break the configurations or it can leave your computer vulnerable. We don't necessarily recommend this change all the time. Are you sure you want to make this change to this computer? If so, you will hit a yes. And if you have more likely, if you're on a connected network, they're going to ask for some type of username and password that's associated with your administrators group in order to make those changes. If you have that, sometimes it's just our for our home computers, it's just you can just hit yes and you'll be able to go past the screen. But if you're in like a work environment, it may be your username and password that allows you to actually make those changes. But if you're just a regular user on the network, then you probably won't have the permissions and you will need some type of elevated account in order to make those changes. Two-factor. Do we need to go over two-factor? Thumbs up, thumbs down?
Let's go over.
Okay. So two-factor is a way that we can, when we give people user accounts, we can have an extra layer of security to go along with it. So it's so easy to give you a username, password, and say, hey, every 90 days change it. Well, some people may make weak passwords, right? And if that's the case, then what's the odds of it actually being hacked? Pretty good, right? So we put in extra layer to help us out, and that's the two-factor. And two-factor is always going to be something extra, and it's going to be opposite of what you put in the first time. So typically always matched up with a username and password is always going to be something you know. A username and password should be something you just have in your mind. It shouldn't be written down, should be in your mind. So a two-factor can't be another something you know. So in this case, what you'll see is that you'll see some people, they'll give you your username and password, and then they'll say, okay, what was your pet's first name or your first pet's name, your mother's maiden name, and your first job. And they'll ask you those three questions and think that that's a multi-factor authentication. That's not it. That's just asking you two things that you should know. And the thing about those questions is that anybody that's kind of close to you or has done any type of proper reconnaissance could probably figure out those things just by looking you up on your social media sites or your just having a short conversation with you. Really, you could probably get those type of answers. And that's where, not to really jump back in the TikTok thing, but that's where the things with TikTok kind of, it goes a little bit left in the cybersecurity, because if we're giving up those type of information, then it's information gathering on their part, and now they can have all of this information on you, as a person. They know your first name, last name, your birth date, and then your address, which is 4 things. So what else I need to in order to open up a credit card in your name? Only thing I really need now is just a social security card, or social, or I could just have you put that card into the profile if you want to buy things such as the TikTok shop, or if you want to sell on the TikTok shop, you would have to give me your your social security number. And so now I have all of this information that I gathered on you. If I wanted to just go and open up a gas card in your name and get $2,000 worth of gas in your name, I can do that. I have all the information. They're not going to check me anyway. Some of those places that you open up credit cards, they don't ask for photo ID. They just they want those 4 or 5 different informations that differs you from everybody else in the world. As long as we have a identifier, a social to go along with that, we could pin it to this social. And it's almost scamming 101. Not saying that I scam or anything. It's what it is. All right. Hold on. So we have the authentication. Oh, going back to MFA. So those are 2 things that you know. What you want is something that is opposite of what you do, or what you have, what you know. So it may be something that you have, which is an authentication app or a hard token, something that you have to have on your person. Could be an application to your phone, right? You open up the application, it says, hey, are you trying to log into an email? Put use your fingerprint to authenticate on this. So now it's using actually 3 things. is using something, your username and password, is asking you to verify in the app. That's 2. And then is asking you to verify again with your fingerprint. That's multi-factor authentication at its finest. And so the odds of you being hacked on the username and password side is great. But if we have your account set up with MFA, then now that hacker needs to have your phone. And matter of fact, they need to have your fingerprint or your face configured in order to get into your phone, in order to authenticate and then authenticate again on the app. So that's MFA. Wonderful piece. We need to get it more implemented in our day-to-day lives. Windows login. So on Windows 11, this is where I pretty much seeing Windows Hello. They're really pushing this this type of mobile environment on its customers, and so they're, instead of us having passwords, 8-digit passwords to log into a Windows 11 machine, they typically want to set you up with Windows Hello and have you set up a PIN or a fingerprint or scan your face for facial recognition. The thing about that is that, when it comes to biometrics, some people are a little weary about biometrics. They don't want to be on the grid, so to say. They don't want the government taking a look at how they look or having those configurations. But I mean, they gave you a social security number. They already got you in the books. I don't understand that. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So just be aware of that they may ask you. You understand Windows authentication, that we normally have a username and password, but that Windows Hello is something new, and they're typically going to ask you things that your mobile device will ask you. Single sign-on is a way that can be confused with authentication, multi-factor, where this is where you authenticate one time on a particular, let's say, site, and now since you are signed in with this site, it automatically signs you in with another site. A typical thing that you'd see is, you sign in to Facebook, you automatically sign in with Instagram. But you can have this, you kind of see this with other sites too, where they have, this is called federation, but you go to a site and then they say, hey, it has nothing to do with Google, but if you want to log in with your Google email, that's fine too. And then now you'll be authenticated because we set you up to be authenticated through the Google. But that's more on the federated side versus it being a single sign-on. Window domains and Active Directory. So I've been preaching Active Directory is something that all you guys need to know and learn. At least how to go in there and change your password. That's the least that I want you guys to do. And we covered that in Core 1. So those were in those labs that I want you guys to really take advantage of and be able to go back in there and get those processes down. Because if you can understand what AD is doing when it comes to users, you could put those things on your resume, and those things will speak loud, just as if you had a certification or a degree to go along with it. Because Active Directory is a tool that we use on a day-to-day venture. In every business that I ever worked in, I always use Active Directory ever since 2007. And I'm pretty sure it's been there way before that. So if you got an opportunity to go into those labs and just kind of get a feel for going in an Active Directory, creating a user, changing their password, giving them permissions, you can put those things on your resume and let them speak for themselves. Now, domain controllers is something we haven't talked about, but this is where we can create our own private domain in our network. And when we create our private domain, this is where we have Active Directory kind of step in right after we create a domain controller. A domain controller is going to sit at the top of, I want you to think kind of a Christmas tree. It's going to be that star at the top. And then everything else will fall under that domain controller. And so if we need to make any changes to computers, groups, users, it'll be under that star. Um, if the if you and that domain controller is going to be the end all be all when it comes to authenticating users to the network. So if you can't get connected to the network or to the DC, then you're not able to log into the network or the private network that we have set up. Now, group policies falls into that domain controller lane where we want to be able to send out different permissions to every different group that we have, every different department, um, different computers, printers that we have under that domain controller. We want to use group policies to give them permissions, take permissions away, give them creative control points, or maybe take it away. All right. So GPOs is definitely going to help that out, and how you each computer is going to be able to um, update the GP policies on their PC by having those commands ran, such as you open up your CMD and you run the command GP update in order for it to go back to the DC and look to see if there's any changes. So this is how the group policy manager looks over here to your right. It's going to, all of these different sections here are different things that we can configure when it comes to, what all a user can do and what they can't do. We set the standard here, and then once we push that out, we have that computer do a GP update and pull in those policies, a copy of these policies, and then govern itself accordingly. All right, MDM, the mobile device management. This is where we can bring in our tablets, our phones, and be able to have a management um, over them and decide if we want different applications on them, what type of applications we can run, what photos we can take, if we can shut down the cameras uh, functions on these different types of software. We could only make it to where you could just make phone calls and not text. We can do anything that we really wanted to do when it comes to mobile device management, um, and being able to control what we have come into our network, because those devices, believe it or not, is they're different gateways into our network. And so they connect to the internet, and more likely they're going to connect to our email, our internal email, or they may connect to our internal device. I mean, drives, network drives. And so that's a gateway in. If that's the case, and we don't allow TikTok to be on our desktop, or we don't allow Xbox game to be ran on our desktops, we should have that same type of setting on our laptops, mobile devices as well, because we don't want someone to, like how we just talked about how Reddit can get out of hand. Let's say we don't have that blocked on the tablets wise, and it gets out of hand, and then they bring in something from Reddit or from a outside website into that phone, and that phone is connected internally to different drives or the emails, and then that email goes to other devices or other users. That's how things can get out of control very easily. And so we use a MDM in order to subside those different configurations and make sure that we keep them under control. Give me 1 second. Let me take a little swig. All right, last stretch. Windows shares. So this is where we're going to get into the different ways we can actually connect to each other, and kind of building off what I just said when it came to those mobile devices. You don't want things to be all connected, and then somebody just they make one bad move, and then now everybody's affected. So we can have set up work groups. If you're not, we talked about domain controllers. If you have a private network that's under domain controller, everybody's network into that controller, that domain, right? But if you have a standalone computer or you're not a part of that domain, then you're typically just kind of part of a work group. You may be able to get on a network, but you're not able to see anything internal. So no internal hard drives that you can see, share drives, printers. You don't see those type of things. Whereas a work group is just going to be kind of like having that peer-to-peer action to that. So a good way to really put that into perspective, pull this up, go here to my whiteboard. A peer-to-peer is going to look similar to this. We'll have our router here, and we'll have two laptops. So let's put in a line. And that peer-to-peer is typically symbolized like this. They'll be on the network, but they pretty much just have access to each other. So if they have a drive that that this PC wanted to share with this computer, they can. But if you had another one that was kind of off here, connected to this copy, connected to this router, then this router is not connected or not talking to these two PCs down here. So let's just say Susan is on this computer and she wants to share a file to these two different computers. She would need to get into this work group or be able to put it in a place to where they can go out to the web and get it. So this is typically emailing out to a personal email address, but being able to send something down to directly to them, they're not connected to any type of web address. Network. So they're not going to be able to communicate with Susan. All right. That's more peer-to-peer. Is there a place for it? Yes. Do you see it often? No. You'll see one standalone machine, but two of them really kind of connected, or two or more. No, you don't really see that. Now, share file is a way to, if you guys are familiar with network drives, sometimes we can have our network drive be on the network and accessible by departments or just particular users or groups. And those network drives we don't have to worry about going to a particular spot to get to it. We could just typically go to our file explorer and see those network drives here. They'll kind of be like this, just a part of our window here, and we can go in there and then now take anything out of that hard drive or put anything in there. But we don't have to physically connect to it. We don't have to put in a USB to it. It'll already be on our network. And this is typically because of the profiles that we have, which we'll get to later down here somewhere. But network drives are typically things that we really want to have in every environment. A lot of people use them, especially when working in different groups, different departments, and they're always on the go. And we just need somewhere to put our files so somebody else can see them, them, and then leave it there. We typically kind of, if you are familiar with SharePoint, SharePoint is kind of like that, where um, it's like this big repository for files. So this is a screenshot of how those mapping those drives will look. You can map computers as well. You typically don't see that, but you can map computers to your network and be able to not necessarily remote into them when they're connected this way, but you may be able to go into the directory on that computer and send information from yours to that computer behind the scenes without giving them a USB cord, USB thumb drive in order to plug in and then drag and drop off that drive. You can do this over the network. So those map drives that I was talking about, they typically look like that, where they have that folder open with a green network connector. And the same thing goes for those printers, and we'll get into printers right now. Printer sharing is typically, when you're talking about having one printer for everyone in a building or a department, we're gonna just share that thing out. We're not putting it on one person's desktop and having a dedicated printer for them. If that happens, it's probably a smaller LaserJet printer that person just has just for them. But if we're talking about a dedicated printer, inkjet, then or a thermal printer, then we're talking about it sitting off by itself, not connected to anything but the network. It has an Ethernet connection, and we are using the settings in there to network it out to everyone. So everyone who joins the domain, this is also still falling under that domain analogy, right? Still falls under that star under that tree. And whoever falls under that, now we can have other people who falls under that tree be able to talk to it. So long as it's joined to the domain and the domain sees it as an object, then it can be shared with other objects in that field. This goes back to the permissions inheritance, that if we create one object at a particular setting in AD, any type of child component of that a first objective is probably going to inherit the permissions that you get from the start of the first build, right? So whenever it drops down into the child, let's say we create an administrator user, and then we create a copy of an administrator off of that, and we just use a regular user account, then the permission still may be that of an administrator. Okay. And it may not be as eye-opening as just going to the permission side of it and seeing what all they can do and then checking those boxes. It may be until you actually see what a person can do. Maybe they don't get prompted for a UAC because it still has the permissions of an administrator for a regular user account. So just be aware that sometimes when we are copying things in AD, that it will pull different inheritance down. Now, joining a domain, we talked about a domain setup, a domain controller, and remember that domain controller is going to oversee everything that goes into it or under it. Any object, printers, devices, printers, mobile devices, laptops, desktops, servers, routers, doesn't matter. If they join a domain, that domain controller sees everything as far as who is on the domain and who could be authenticated to that domain. So we typically want to go and join a domain. If you don't join the domain, remember that's going to put you in a work group and you're not part of that domain. So you won't receive any type of group policies under that. That could be a good thing, could be a bad thing. It's all about your situation and why would you need to join the domain or not. X said it yesterday that if we join a domain, you typically have to have a reboot right after that. So just be ready if you ever have to join someone to the network and join the domain. Just have them go ahead and save their stuff because they're gonna have to reboot regardless. There's no suppressing the reboot. It will happen. Now, a lot of these actions are, as far as mapping and having shared drives, this is possible because roaming profiles. When we give someone a domain account and we have them log into any computer on the campus, then they should have some type of profile that follows them from computer to computer. And if they save something on computer one and then they decide to log into computer three with the same profile, um, certain folders will transfer over to that new, um, it will follow that user wherever they authenticate at. We typically see this when it comes to like cloud backups or whenever you get a new phone and you put in you put in your same old profile should pull in contacts, text, um, pictures, things of that nature. It may not pull in your individual apps and then you have to actually log into those apps, but it should pull in some personal files and directories that you have. And that's where those home folders come in. That's just a reiteration of what I was just saying, that um, different settings will follow that particular profile around in the domain. If it's outside of the domain, then you won't see those changes. So if you ever work for a company and you have a Windows 11 machine at work, but then you log into your Windows 11 machine at home, it's two different profiles. One is not going to be the other. And even if you were to able to log into a home computer with your work email username and password, which is impossible, it won't pull that information over because it needs the network in order to pull all that information that's on that roaming profile over. All right. I know that was a lot of information, but is there any questions? So let's say me and you worked at Walmart and we are in stock. We're stocking inventory, and we want to keep a track of all our inventory that comes in for the whole year. And I say, "Hey, Majesty, I'm gonna put this drive in, and it's gonna be labeled the D drive, right? And you got a laptop, I got a laptop. I'm going to map this to the network, so I'm going to, and then in turn map that drive to your laptop. And so now, instead of you trying to find my laptop just to get to that D drive to see the updated spreadsheets, you can see those same spreadsheets on your particular machine by yourself. So if I'm out that day and I can't make it into work, you could just go to your file explorer here, pull this up, and go to the D drive here and go in there and update the spreadsheet. And then when I come back into work and I log in, I don't have to bother you. You can go out there and do and stop and whatnot. I don't have to sit down with you and say, hey, what was the updates to the spreadsheet? Let me see your machine. I can just go automatically in on my own particular PC and go to that same D drive. That by it being network, that puts it in a centralization spot, and we can both connect to it without going on each other's machine. Yay or no, nay?
Oh, yeah, I understand this. So it's like essentially like a shared drive. So my question is like, What is the benefit of something like that compared to, I mean, I would assume that most companies these days just use cloud services with things such as
Yes, the
data.
cloud is killing a lot of this stuff that's just kind of unnecessary. Because now instead of having that instead of us trying to set this up, now this is not setting this drive up here is not a necessarily, hey, it's I'm gonna plug it into the server and then now it's good to go. I got to get an IP address for it, and then I got to make sure that I have the right permissions to where your computer can see it and trust it, and my computer sees it and trust it, and then anybody else who wants to join our team have to trust it as well. Headache, big headache. But if we go and we get SharePoint in the OneDrive in the cloud, I can give you a link to that, or I can give you a link to Google Drive, and we can have the spreadsheets in there and update them there. It eliminates those things. So just like a lot of things that we talked about in A plus, a little bit of dated technology. We are moving more to the cloud, and the cloud just makes more sense. You don't have to now another thing that goes with that network drive. If the network goes down, we can't get to the drive. If you get a new computer, you don't get this drive. I have to remap that drive to that computer. If you change your password, it's going to want another it's going to want you to re-authenticate with that drive. Just a whole bunch of hassle. But you got them. I'm not going to say that you're not going to go into a work spot and not see it, because some people live and die by these network drives. And sometimes the information is so sensitive that way we don't want to put them in the cloud and have a third party look after it. So you have good points and bad points about it, but you're right. A cloud can easily eliminate these things. Any more questions? All right, then, y'all.